an acronym for science, technology, engineering, and math, represents a vital and interdisciplinary field that has a profound impact on various aspects of our lives. STEM education, research, and careers play a crucial role in driving innovation, technological advancements, and economic growth. While progress has been made, there still are disparities and challenges faced by individuals from underrepresented racial and ethnic groups. Hi, I'm Tej. On Chezuba Talks, we take great pride in sharing stories of grit and inspiration. Today's nonprofit is on a mission to provide support, mentorship, and opportunities for minorities pursuing a career in science, technology, engineering, and math. So, Win in STEM Incorporated is founded by a dynamic first generation African American who is passionate about making an impact. Her name is Shade Luwoye, and she is an engineer by day and a podcast host by night. She's a recipient of the 2022 UMass Alumni Honors Outstanding Young Alumni Award. And she decided to create the Win in STEM podcast as a safe space to bring this issue to the forefront and to help retain and increase the number of minorities in STEM. Sade interviews people of color, STEMinists as she calls them. She talks about their STEM journeys and discusses topics such as imposter syndrome, the mentorship, sponsorship, negotiating salaries, and landing dream jobs. Welcome to the podcast, Sade.
Thank you. Thank you for having me,
From
Tay.
one podcast host to another.
Yes.
So, Shadi, tell us, when did you become aware of this inequality in STEM fields?
Wow. I came across this issue when I was in college. So I majored in electrical engineering at UMass Amherst, University of Massachusetts Amherst, and I noticed that in a lot of my classes, I was either the only Black female, sometimes the only female, or just the only Black person in general. And that I've saw that throughout my whole college journey. And then graduating and going into the profession and speaking to other people who, minorities that looked like me, they also had the same experience. Not only in college, but also in the professional realm. As you know, for STEM, minorities are not much in the field. And it's just something that we definitely need to change. And I started Women STEM to bring that issue to the forefront and hopefully to one day make a significant change to increase the number of minorities in STEM.
Right. So, do you think this problem exists even in schools where STEM subjects are not really inclusive, or you think it comes only into where the selection process comes into in
Mhm.
college?
I think it starts before school. Even before I got into college, I took a lot of honors classes, AP classes, and still I was the only Black female or Black person in general. Um, and I just think it stems from awareness. So not a lot of people know the impact of the science, technology, engineering, math classes and the importance of having that in your background and just starting from a young age. Because even for me, I didn't know anything about STEM, growing up. My parents immigrated from Nigeria, and to them, the only three careers they knew of was being an engineer, a doctor, or a lawyer. Didn't know what the career entails. They just knew that those careers brought money. So I didn't really have that awareness of what do I need to know to excel if I want to be an engineer? What skills do I need to excel to be an engineer? What courses should I be looking into? What extracurricular activities should I be involved in so I can learn more? I do believe if I was um, knew about STEM at an earlier age or knew about the resources like STEM camps that are out now or STEM specific high schools that are out there now, I definitely know that
Right.
I'll
Uh-huh.
probably maybe more advanced on where I am now, or maybe I would be in a different field in STEM. Who knows? But I think definitely it's the awareness is a big key factor that really shapes
True.
the society of STEM.
True. And now through Win in STEM, you are creating awareness through your podcast. And do you have any other initiatives uh, that you ensure that younger children are able to
Mhm.
listen into your podcast or go to schools or talk about it at high school level, wherever?
Yes, yes. So even before the podcast started, I started the podcast during COVID. So before COVID hit, I was very active in doing volunteering with my employer, inviting high school students, elementary students to the facility to learn more about engineering, doing Engineers Week in February. Or I would go to different colleges in the area and do tech talks to help prepare them for engineering conferences or STEM conferences that are coming up, or I would be a mentor to a college student that's nearby. So
That's
that was really I guess, the foundation before I started the podcast.
right.
So once the podcast started, I was thinking of how can I still be impactful with the limitations that COVID brought. So I knew the podcast was a excellent way to not only mentor in an informal way to people in my vicinity, in my state, in my community, but even outside my community across the globe, across the nation. And I have listeners who are tuning in from countries I've never even heard of or even
Yeah.
traveled to. So I'm able to use the podcast to share knowledge, not only for me, for my guests, things that we wish we knew when we were starting our STEM journey, or just resources that we've gained that, hey, it helped me, I know it'll help you, sort of thing. So besides that, sometimes I'm still well connected with my alma mater, UMass Amherst. So I go back there often to either, do speaking engagements, participate in conferences. So I try to do as much as I can to help people out. Because through life, a lot of people have helped me out. So it's only best for me to give back um, to the community.
Yeah, the podcast is a very powerful tool to get across to people. And I'm sure you are yourself a role model for young children in the STEM. So do you go there dressed? I remember when I was teaching, I was part of the Space Liaison, that confederation, and I we had to come to class wearing those space suits. They gave us those space suits, and we had to walk into class, and I think that creates an impact. The visual also, as well as listening to somebody who has been there, very important. And I think today even dolls are dressed as astronauts and
Yeah.
physicists. So that's good news, isn't it?
Yeah, representation is definitely key. I remember, I think it was 2 years ago, I was a keynote speaker for a UMass Amherst Women in Computing Day. And my presentation, I showed them images of people who are in STEM fields that weren't women. And I use that as an opportunity to let people know, like, hey, this is a male astronaut, but did you know that you can be one too? Or this is a scientist working on curing the next diseases. Although he's a male, there's females in this field too. You can be that too. Here's an engineer creating the next technology. You can be that too. Just it's really good to show representation because growing up, your environment really shapes the way you think and the way you navigate through life.
Very true, very true. Let's take a break to understand what Chezuba is. Everyone at some point ponders on how this beautiful life can be made more meaningful. Maybe you're a leader trying to enhance your employees' experience at your organization. Or you already work for the community and seek volunteers with state of the art skills to strengthen your nonprofit. Whatever your situation, know that you can make a difference. Chezuba began with this very vision, a vision to facilitate every skill and every passion in the world in meeting a social need. Corporate volunteering has several benefits for both businesses and organizations. In parallel, experienced and enthusiastic volunteers join NGO workers, enabling them to serve the community more effectively. Chezuba offers everyone looking to add purpose and meaning to their lives a chance to connect or volunteer virtually with nonprofit organizations from over 100 countries around the world. Visit www.chezuba.net and explore opportunities to find meaning. Chezuba, your platform to do good. And now, back with our guest. And do your guests, the people who you talk to on your podcast, do they
Mhm.
also are they also taking efforts to ensure that underrepresentation is addressed?
Oh, yes, yes, yes. A lot of people who I've interviewed on my podcast also have their own organizations as well. There's one guest I had, I don't remember her name at the moment, but she works at Amazon, but she has her own mentorship program that she has for females, which is great. I had another podcast guest who owns her own like leadership development program to help professionals grow in their career. So a lot of these, my guests, they've been through different circumstances in their life that affected them, that has helped them create resources and tools and solutions to help people who are, following into their success.
Yeah. And how do you select your guests? Do you look them up, or is it through your connects?
Really through connections. I'm blessed to have a lot of friends who are minorities and successful in their field. And as the podcast has been growing, people will reach out to me and say, "Hey, I've listened to your podcast. I think I'll be a great asset." And lo and behold, they are amazing guests. So really that my community recommends people, and people just find me, and it just works out perfect.
I think it just grows from there.
Yes, yes, for
Right.
sure.
Yes. I read on your website that you funded $1,300 in the first few months itself, and there is funding also involved. So obviously, word is
Mhm.
getting around. Obviously, there's a lot of success coming in there. How do you go about measuring your success? Is there any metric there?
For metrics, I look for metrics through podcast listens. So just trying to gauge on, the demographics that are listening to the podcast, locations that are listening to the podcast episodes, on even just feedback from listeners. They send me tons of emails all the time saying how impactful the episodes have been, or even the podcast guests will contact me and say like, "Hey, like so many people have been reaching out to me
Yeah.
after talking to you on your podcast, like you're making a great difference." Or even I think there was a period of time where I took a break from podcasting, and even during that break, I would have people contact me and say, "Hey, Sade, when's the next episode? When's the next episode? We're waiting." So that's really a message for me that, okay, this podcast, this organization is really making a difference and impact in people's lives, even if I might not know them, but my voice is reaching people and making a
Reaching
difference.
people. Yes.
Hmm.
While we are here, could you just tell the audience who's listening to this about your podcast and the name and where can we find it?
Yes. So the podcast is called Win in STEM, STEM, and it's basically a platform to highlight successful people of color who are doing great, amazing things in their field, and to show people that they can have a seat at the table. As minorities, we sometimes go into these rooms and
Yeah.
the table's filled, right? We're the only one. There's no one that looks like us. But I really want the podcast to show that no matter your demographics, no matter what you look like, your skin color, male or female, you have a seat at the table. You have a voice. And I use this podcast to do so, especially to kind of give back to the community and share resources and tips and advice of things I wish I knew. So
Yeah.
people who are following my footsteps won't make the same mistakes, and hopefully their path will be easier than mine.
Where can we find the podcast? On
Oh yeah, so
Spotify?
you can find it on Spotify, on Google, um, Apple Podcasts, on YouTube. I think
Everywhere,
every
every
platform is
platform.
there. Yes, yes.
Great, wonderful. Shade, you also mentioned that you help people of color navigate through the job market in terms of interview
Hmm.
skills or in terms of sponsorship. So, how do you
Yes.
go about that?
Yes. So through my podcast, I host like various topics. So a recent topic I can think off my head is negotiation. So when I got my first job out of college, I had no idea that negotiation was even a thing, that you can negotiate a salary. You know, if you get a job offer and they state X amount of money, you can negotiate and ask for more. I did not know that was a thing until later down the line in my professional career. So I had an episode and I interviewed my podcast guest and we talked about different strategies on how to negotiate your salary and ways to do it effectively so you're winning at the end. And then another episode that we did was how to prepare for the interview. And my podcast guest was able to provide resources of follow-up questions that you ask. You know, it's really good knowledge to ask questions at the end of an interview. So an interview is asking, "Hey, do you have any questions?" Silence is not the answer. Always come up with a question, right? And not a lot of people know that. So my podcast guest was able to compile a list of questions that you can ask the interviewer as well.
Most times, I think it is more of confidence and being afraid to maybe ask those questions. Maybe sometimes it can be
Yeah.
uncomfortable for them to, getting past
Yeah.
that barrier is very important.
Yes, for
Lastly,
sure.
Shade, I have a question. What is the advice that you would offer to people who are facing unique challenges and obstacles in pursuing career goals?
Yeah. My advice would be to seek a community. I think community is very important, especially when you're going through different challenges. Your community is really there to be your safe haven, your comfort, and your backbone, right? And within that community, you can find mentors. And I strongly advise everyone to find a mentor. A mentor is needed in every area of your life. If you're a college student, if you're a professional, if you're in STEM, if you're not in STEM, a mentor is really someone who has your best interest at heart and wants to see you succeed. So I truly advise everyone to find a mentor to not only share your challenges, but kind of use them as a beacon of hope and inspiration to help you get over those stumbling blocks and obstacles.
Okay, so finding a mentor and connecting with your community. That is the advice this wonderful engineer is giving people of color everywhere. And do not be afraid to ask questions. Thank
Yes.
you so much, Shade. It was wonderful talking to you.
Well, thank you. It was a pleasure being here.
Efforts are being made to address issues of underrepresentation. Initiatives include creating policies and practices, but somehow, unless it comes from within you to connect, unless people themselves make effort, these efforts will be not successful in that case. So, actively combating racial discrimination and to foster inclusive environments, STEM fields can tap into a broader talent pool and drive innovation and excellence. Thank you for being on this episode of Chezuba Talks. It was wonderful to talk to Shade. Lovely talking to
Yeah.
you, Shade.
Have a good night. Thank you.